This person wants to know how to set up a preliminary drawing when you have lots and lots of foliage. And this person is referring to Quick Tip 251, which is the big picture. And she's questioning whether this should be done with loose contour or with a generalized grid. Well, either of those will work for you, but if you do decide to use a generalized grid, I suggest that you do something like this. And I'm not going to really do it, but I'm going to show you. And that is just divide the reference into 4 sections. So one would be horizontal, right through the middle horizontally, and one would be vertically, right through the middle vertically. And then on your canvas, we're going to pretend that this is a canvas. On your canvas, you'll do the same thing. You would put a line this way and this way. Now, the reason I suggest that, the more sections you have in a grid, the more cramped your drawing might be. And therefore, it might make your painting more cramped than you really want it to be. So if you want your painting to be more alive, trust yourself to depend upon your ability to follow the edges of the subject rather than try to make it exactly like you're seeing in the reference. Now, the important thing in when doing foliage or when doing any preliminary drawing for a painting, the important thing is to be as simple as you can. If you put every little detail in there, that's going to cramp you as well. It's going to be more like painting by number than it is painting by expression. So what I suggest is that you narrow it down to as few shapes as possible and ask yourself, what do you need? What do you actually need there, need present, need placed on the canvas in order to guide you through the entire painting? Now in this case, and in most cases when you have foliage, you're going to have some tree trunks. You see, in this case, we have the river, that's a shape. We have this big tree trunk. Now that's the only tree trunk that we really see. Oh, there's a little one back here, but that's insignificant. This only tree trunk that we really see. The other thing that we see in the way of shape is this pattern of leaves. And that would be the only thing where you would really maybe pay closer attention to the contour. So let's see how that would work. Another thing, it's better if you look at it in terms of shadow shapes and light shapes when you can. Now in the river we have definite edge. We have a definite edge here, we have a definite edge here, and definite edges here. So in that case, because you're showing or you're placing the river shape, I think it will work better if you go ahead and place just those edges. But when you're working with foliage, where you've got so many leaves and so many twigs and so much going on, it's better not to try to do that in terms of shapes of those things, but look at the total shape created by shadows. So here's what I would suggest. Whether you're using the grid or not, this is what I would suggest. First of all, place a shape that is significant to the entire thing. So the river shape, and if we would look at the river shape and we would locate it, we can see in the reference it's located, oh, what is that, about a third, a little bit more than a third of the way down, about right here. Now you can decide, because you're the artist, you can decide, do you want it lower, do you want it higher, or do you want it sort of placed like you see it in the reference? That's your choice. And so that's the placement vertically, you might say, and then the placement horizontal. Where does that appear? It appears here slightly towards the middle. So I would just say right here, and all you need is that one line to show the portion of the river that you see in the distance. And then you look at the angle of the river here, and you see that angle is very, very slight. If we were looking at a clock, 3 o'clock would be like this. That is about 3:30, that tilt. Now if you'll notice, it's kind of a zigzag tip, so you can sort of do that like zigzag, sort of like that, at about the angle of 3 o'clock. a lot of times when people are looking down a river or a road, they'll want to make that way too steep, that edge. So be careful that you look at the tilt. How are these edges tilting? So that is a major shape, and then we're looking on the side. Now what we see on the other side here is that this tree, this foliage, this collection of foliage, all the way through here, helps create the edge on this side. And so what you could do there is just follow the direction. Now you might call it contour. I think of this more as a gestural contour, where you're not going really, really slow, but you're being general enough and going fast enough so that you don't really stilt your preliminary drawing. And so what we could do here is simply look at the tilt of that edge, and when you're looking for like tilts, the direction in which lines are tilted, edges are tilted, and if there are curves, direction in which they're curved, that way, instead of looking at it as a bunch of leaves or foliage, look at what's causing it to be that way, and it's the edge is tilting or curving. That's what causes it to be as you see it. And so you could simply just do a very general line that comes down and indicates where this is. Now up here we see a little bit of light, so now I'm looking at the shadow. I'm looking at just the shadow portion right here, and you see that rounds up like that. We have a little bit of light coming through here, and then we have a little shadow, and that shadow part is tilting up like this. And if we were looking at that as if we were looking at a clock, that's pointing sort of towards 2 o'clock. So we just do that tilt. Now we get to the top like this, and we see that this portion is still in shadow, but there's some light coming through. So you treat that as a general shape, not disregarding this shape right here. So just treat that as a general shape. Where do you want that to go? And I think maybe it's going about like that. So now we can see that in this photograph, the light is sort of gradating into shadow, so we wouldn't really need to indicate anything right in there. That is the kind of thing that you take care of when you're doing the painting itself. But we can see here, this portion seems to be in front of this. And when something is in front of something else, it helps you to keep up with it if you simply make an indication. You can make that indication go in any direction you want it to go. I see a little bit of a division right here. If I think I need that, I'll put that in as a reminder. If I don't think I need it, then I'm going to just let that go on up and kind of peter out up there. Now I have some general shapes already beginning to form here. Now if I'm getting down here, I'm seeing that a huge shadow here that's showing us distance in that foliage, in this foliage right here. I may or may not want that, all that, but I can indicate a little bit of that. Now this is going at, you see this shape right here overlaps there, and then this little portion down here comes down and to the edge of the river about right here, and that begins, you see that the edge of the shadow, that sort of indicates where the foliage is coming out of the ground. So there again we have a slight tilt. It's not exactly horizontal, it's tilting in a little bit towards upward of 9 o'clock. And then we'll see another tiny shape right here. So that will give us then a shape within which we can, when we start painting, we can locate all this other stuff. So that's all you're aiming for, is simply to place things so that you can, when you begin the painting, you can kind of locate where they are. Now we see here, we've got that, we see here, well, we could just use this whole corner here as a single shape, and we can come right in here and indicate where the bank of this little drop off here meets the water. So we could just come down like that. You see that's very general, a very general placement. Now we can place the tree. This general placement then gives us the placement that we need so that we know where we are when we start working the painting. So now we can locate the tree. Now if you'll notice, when we do this general placement at first, it sort of creates a kind of grid in a way, because it locates things in such a way that then we know where to put other things. So here we can see the tree sort of comes out about right here, and then it tilts in this direction, and it sort of straightens up a little bit, as it gets up further to where this edge is, it begins to divide. One part's going one way and one part's going another. It begins to tilt like this. There's foliage in the way, and it sort of, does that. You don't want this to end at the corner. I'll take that way. Never want anything pointing towards the corner. Let it either go up like that or go out like that. And you don't. It's up to you as to how you put those shapes in. So you would continue this. So we've got a limb here. We've got a little foliage coming out here. We have a limb here. Is that a limb? Big limb. It's a portion of the tree where it splits off. And then we see right here. Then, as it comes down, we see a portion where the tree trunk really does split. And then we see it's going in this direction. We follow in which direction is it going. It goes up vertically, it's kind of towards 12 o'clock. It tilts over a little bit, sort of between 12 and 1 inch, and then goes off the edge there. And then we can see as it comes down, we see foliage sort of interfering. So, see, I'm sort of doing a gestural contour where I'm sort of skipping over places where the lines don't go. I've seen so many paintings where there'll be a tree and the limbs will go straight up without any foliage overlapping. Well, if you study nature, you'll see that you're going to see foliage overlapping various limbs and twigs and so on as they scoot. And you also will see them in front of the trunk of the tree. So you provide for those things and continue, sort of like I'm doing here. Just indicate what you see. In what direction is it going. As this comes down here, now you can see that this portion of the tree is tilting right in here. It's sort of, this comes off that, and then we'll see as it comes down, we see something like this. We see as it comes down something like that, and it merges in with the shadow just a little bit right in here. So we can decide now, maybe drawing a little bit wider than the tree, but then we see this begins to tilt in this direction right here as it comes around. Now that is enough. Well, then you can place the other limbs in there in the same way with the same consideration. About this stuff right over here, it's a good idea to not try to put that in, those specific shapes in exactly as you see them. If you'll notice, they're all in shadow. So just sort of indicate where they are. And I would sort of indicate that very generally. Indicate to myself right in here, this is where that stuff lives, right in here. So I would go throughout the whole thing. I'm not going to do the whole thing here, just enough to show you. I would go out through the whole thing, not try to just get the character of it as a pattern, because that's what it is. It's just a pattern. And then we see that pattern. This pattern is moving in this direction. This pattern is moving in that direction. So then we would do a similar thing with that pattern. I won't go throughout the whole thing because this is repetition. The kind of thing I did here to complete this pattern is repetition. Now what I suggest, well, I see one other thing back here I would like to indicate, and that is this is shadow. All this in here is in shadow. And so I think it is always a good idea if you can kind of indicate where things fall into shadow so that shadow becomes really indistinct. If we were there, we would probably see that more. I got up a little bit too far. I'm going to lower that down, bring that down a little bit lower there. If we were there in plein air, we would see that more clearly. We would know exactly what's behind there. But now the thing to do is to evaluate and see if you have placed now all the images that you need to place in order to begin your painting. And if you didn't, then in the preliminary drawing, feel free to edit it. I did this on paper because I thought it'd be easier to show you, pretending that this would be a canvas. When you're setting up your preliminary drawing, you might be using a brush, a small brush or a thin brush with a wash, or you might be using something like a Tombow pen, or some people even use a pencil on canvas. Some people use charcoal and then put a fixative over it. Doesn't matter what you use, but it's a good idea to use something that is editable, something that you can lift out and adjust, because here is the place to make that adjustment for editing, not wait until the painting is nearly finished and then try to adjust. So it's a good idea at this point to examine the preliminary drawing, be sure the shapes are where you want them to be. Now, of course, the next thing I always like to do to make it even easier when I get into the painting is I like to do the no tan. You can go to quick tip 44 and see how to compose a no-tan. I show another way of creating a no-tan in quick tip 11, where you cover the whole thing in wash and lift out where the lights are. So that's your choice, whether you want to compose within a no-tan or whether you have another method. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.